Health and safety, typically we focus on the negatives, right? The non-compliance. It's obviously massively important to focus on the positives because no one wants bad news all the time. Can you think of a time where you saw like a real transformation with a client?
Yeah, there's a few. So I suppose to set the scene, we got called in a couple of years ago. I won't say the client's name, but essentially they had a few issues, to be fair. So they were going through quite a big growth journey. They were on the journey from taking their business from kind of like 5 million turnover. They'd started off as a subcontractor.
Right.
I think they were an electrical contractor. They saw that, main contracting, there was a bit to be made there. And they'd grown it to about 20 million turnover. So that's probably looking after about 6 or 7 projects at a time. They did what a lot of people do, is they then decided, right, this health and safety subject's getting a bit too strong, and they said, right, what do we need to do? They went and recruited an internal health and safety resource.
Right. Sorry, what were they doing before that?
They were using templates and stuff like that.
Right,
It was very so they brought in somebody that could manage health and safety from their perspective.
Right.
Probably it set the scene, someone with like 5 or 6 years of experience. Got them involved. And quickly realised that there was a bit of a gap in terms of they'd set their business up, right, and they've got with lots of well-established people who work in the business who were quite close with the directors, subcontractors who have grown with the directors, and all of a sudden you've got somebody who's been sort of handpicked and planted into the business to sort of manage health and safety. Probably wasn't that well communicated from the organisation to the operatives and the wider workforce, which was an issue in and of itself. But this person just wasn't a cultural match. They were not pragmatic. They were not thinking. They were more worried about covering their arse, which is common in our industry.
Yep.
And essentially, before you know it, the directors of the company had long-standing people on the phone to them saying, what the hell's going on here? Subcontractors saying that they're not going to work on their jobs going forward because things have went from 0 to 100, probably not 100 in reality, and they just couldn't cope with it.
So stopping works.
Works
no good, you can't come on. And
taking works that should have taken 2 days that were suddenly taking 2 weeks. Project managers who were being bonused on delivery, suddenly the deliveries was going way out. Obviously that has a knock-on effect. So anyway, that was the sort of setting the scene.
Yep.
And ultimately we got called in. I had a relationship with the person, and they said, we're a bit sensitive, we've got this internal resource, but we need to know what's going on. I was like, oh, right, okay, because that's never a good job. Never a good job to be able to go into the company and that you've got to sit there and work with where there's a cultural challenge like that. But we did it. That's something that I'm happy to do. Went in, started with a gap analysis, a diagnostic, find out what's going on. Spoke to all the key players, spoke to the health and safety manager, tried to understand their perspective. It was quite clear from the outset to me that person was not the right person for that business. He had come from a tier 1 background where everything is done within an inch of its life, and he was coming into a contractor of 10 million at the time who were not going to be running things the way that one of the tier 1 contractors was, but he was expecting that too. Yeah. That was his reality. That's what he expected.
He's been hired on CV basically, right? You've done it at the best, no problem doing it at us.
Exactly.
But then when it gets to the us, it's a different world.
Complete mismatch. Yeah. There was some other cultural issues, behavioural issues with the person in question, whereby there's different approaches in health and safety. You can have essentially you've got the policeman in a simple way of looking at it. You've got the policeman and you've got the teacher. This guy was a policeman, right? The company wanted a teacher. So anyway, got called in to do the gap analysis, did the gap analysis, showed them, presented to them what I thought the issues were, had to present them the issues that I thought were there also with the hire that they had made. Left it with them and said, look, from our perspective, if that's all that it is now, that's absolutely fine. You can go away with that and you can do what you want. A month later, they had decided that this person wasn't right for them. There wasn't a match. We then get called in. And essentially, we get called in because they've said, okay, we could go and get an internal resource now, but we don't know how to manage this person. We don't know what we need. What we want is a consistent person or a company that can provide a consistent approach to us. and they said, what can you do for us? We know that this might cost the same money as having a full-time resource and you won't be full-time, or it might cost a little bit more, but we think we would benefit from having your insight at a strategic level, someone who's done it for 20 years, but also your team's level who've done it for 6-7 years, and we pay what we need to pay at the right time, rather than, they could have gone and got a health and safety director, paid him 130 grand a year, and that health and safety director does not want to get out on site. They want to operate strategically. No. Equally, you can go and get someone at the operational level. They don't know how to deal with a board level.
No.
They were growing. They needed that help. So we got in, presented them with a solution, which was, did the gap analysis. Now what we need to do is put together a resource package for you in terms of, we're going to give you a lead or a senior health and safety consultant. They will become your person. That will be your person that will feel like your internal resource. They will do the regular visits. They will hold meetings with you. They will look at your performance data using our online software called Altitude. And essentially over time, what we did is we got into them, created a strategy, made it clear what they were going to do going forward, and then did all the kind of elements underneath that brings it all together. And ultimately we were probably looking at, if we're looking at safety scores, it's not what it's all about, but from a monthly inspection score where they were starting at around 70-75%, they're on average probably now at 90, 93, 95%,
right.
Limiting their repeat actions. Non-compliances are way down, repeat actions are way down. Incidents and near misses, actually, interestingly, up. That actually
reporting though is better.
It can seem counterintuitively.
Yeah.
I believe, and I think we believe,
yep.
Incident reporting, and especially near miss reporting, if you're getting lots, that's actually a good thing, because people feel comfortable and feel like they're in a psychologically safe space to report.
Yeah.
When you see a company with repeat actions week in, week out, which basically means they're not closing them out, no near misses, no incidents, and a not very good score, you can join the dots together and go, their culture is not very good. They have not got an open culture, and I can guarantee if we went there, we could look at the very top of the business and say, you've got someone there who's sweeping things under the carpet, tick box.
100%.
We might not be right for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a sort of a practical example of a client that we got involved with. As I said, main contractor, which is kind of our bread and butter. They had an internal resource, and they actually decided that they could now have an internal resource back into that company. They could have probably two, but they choose to keep us because they like the approach, which is, if one of the team goes on holiday, if they've had a serious incident, they've always got somebody within the business that can help them. So they're supported by a team of 18 to 20 people rather than one person who, if they then go off, if they're sick, if they leave, they've suddenly got the problem straight back at the director's desk.
Yeah. And you've got that varied level of experience, right, that we can provide.
Yeah, that is essentially what you're, without sort of trying to sell it too much, that is essentially what you're paying the money for. You're paying money for different levels at the right time of support from, specific health and safety people with lots of different specialisms in different areas. So if you need someone with construction fire risk assessment experience, you'll get somebody. If you need someone to specifically look at temporary works, we've got somebody. It's that kind of approach where we plug it all together. That's not to say, and I'm always very clear on this, that's not to say that we are the right solution for every client. There's definitely times when there's a main contractor that needs to go internal, and that the consultancy model might work short term, but it's probably not the best long term. And I've got many an instance where I've recommended to clients, to my business owner detriment, where I said to them, I actually believe that the best thing for you to do now is to engage with, to go out and get somebody,
your own person.
go and get your person. And
when is that?
It's different for everybody,
Yeah.
So like, we're talking construction here.
Yeah.
But if I was to flip this now and talk about, we're looking after a big educational establishment on our corporate side of the business. We've worked with them for 10 years.
Right.
And for the last 3 years, I've been saying to them, I believe that what you need is a full-time person to manage the day-to-day and coordinate. They've got 30 buildings, they've got thousands of pupils and staff. They need somebody now. And they had a new COO who now listens, and he's like, okay, that's exactly what we need. But he's like, we still want you to support us in some regards. I think that's really important for a health and safety company to be able to do that. And I get that it's not common because people are looking at
If I tell them to get an internal man, that might be 50 grand out of our
Exactly,
pocket, right?
but the way I look at it, there's always enough business out there, especially with sort of the size that we've got.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but if that genuinely is what the client needs and that's that's in their best interest, why wouldn't we suggest that? Because we can go, and not being big-headed or arrogant here, but there's lots of other main contractors out there. It might take us a little bit of time to find them, but there'll be another person that needs help. So I've always been very clear that there's a journey that people go on, and some people stay with us forever. Some people are very much, you're here until we get to a certain size when we need an internal. And then on rare occasions, there's times when we work together and it's clear that we're not a cultural match and alignment. We try and do the best we can at the outset to avoid that. But there's times when we get involved and we're like, do you know what? This isn't working. We're not right for you. You're not right for us. We're all adults in the room. Let's move apart. And I think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
In terms of your experiences out on projects, you're working with quite a few main contractors yourself.
Yep.
Give us an example of a client that you've taken on, you've come into your work stream, you've taken on board and you've pushed on and grown.
Okay, so best example probably is a residential developer that we're working with. We'll leave their name out. I think we're probably going into year three with them. Should know that, shouldn't I? Year three.
Time's flown.
Yeah, exactly that. We engaged with them, or we made contact, obviously, to try and get the business. Their main issue with their current provider was that they were getting too many people turning up. So one week it could be one person, the next week was another, and then another, and then they're starting to feel that they're not the priority.
Okay.
Right. So it's whoever's free, just send them down to there. They'll go down there. They'll do the inspection. Yeah. So obviously we've tried to, we take that on board and we address that by giving an account manager, whatever, and then they've got a sole point of focus. We recently did a quarterly review with them, and obviously you've mentioned it, repeat observations, right? So that's a massive thing because it shows the site team are actually taking what is in the report, but more so the conversations that I had on site and actually actioning them. They're going to go out there and they're going to move that. They're going to put the edge protection in there. They're going to, I was going to say move the lead, but we're talking real low-hanging fruit there. Yeah. But you know what I mean? They're addressing the actions that we see. Yeah. So in the last quarterly review, so 3 months, they had shaved about 100 repeat observations off of their repeat non-compliances. Okay. So we're doing quite a lot of inspections. We're every 2 weeks. So that number to me is massive, right? That shows engagement from the site managers. It shows that they're being proactive as soon as they get that report, or it shows that at the time, closed out at the time of inspection, they're knocking that out. Yeah. And obviously we pull that data from Altitude. That combined with the overall non-compliance number, which had dropped itself 100, 150, something like that, shows a real improvement just at the site level. So
what have they done practically? So obviously you've identified in the statistics, in the data that we harvest and collect for them, that there was an issue with regards to, we're going to site and we're constantly saying the same thing month after month or week after week. So you've identified that. What did we actually do? How did we influence that? Or did we not? Or was that just self-propelled by them? Because obviously something's happened. Something's changed fundamentally to get 100 less repeat non-compliances over
I think it's both. It's not going to just solely be us. It can't be because we're not there enough. I think their senior management team genuinely wanted to improve. So they would use our reports to put a bit of pressure onto their men, and quite rightly. But we allow the time to talk to the fellas on site and understand what the issue is, right? Sometimes things are going to be a repeat because they're waiting on training. Yeah. I mean, in this case, they actually got a lot better with their training, and they're going on their temporary works courses, they're going on the PASMA, even fire warden training, right? They're getting all that done. Yeah. Those kind of things are typically long-term repeats. Yeah. But I think us and their senior management combined, just they can put the pressure from the top, and we can effectively give a bit of support and say to them, right, what do you need? Why, if it's a paperwork item, okay, why isn't it being done? And then maybe we can. It's as simple as supplying them with the right bit, the right template to fill out.
So Altitude, from our perspective, then is the way it's been designed is it's been designed for twofold, for ourselves and for our clients. So for you, it allows you to basically go on the projects and keep your head up and actually engage with the teams, because from your perspective, an inspection what would you say the approach? What would you say that your approach specifically to you is when you're doing an inspection? What's your in your head? What's the sole purpose of it? Or what's the purpose of it?
Well, the purpose is to try and improve the site ultimately, right? I personally try and keep it quite casual. I don't think we talk about teacher and policeman. I'm not going to be a policeman. That's not my nature.
No.
I mean, I'm interested in build process and all that anyway, so I'm asking questions. Well, why are we doing this as much as anything? But yeah, try and keep it casual. Try and understand what they're doing, right? And then you can understand why they may have made some of the decisions and some of the hazards might be there because of certain issues, overarching issues. The purpose is just to try and improve the site, support the site manager with what he needs. Sometimes it's easier for us to have conversations with the people on site than it is for them because we're not there that often. So, typical, you turn up with a shirt on and an iPad and everybody knows who you are, right? So they sort of tighten up. They might take a little bit more notice of you because they think, oof, it's usually, right, safety man's going to tell me off or whatever. Yeah, the purpose is to improve, to support, to coach, to help, and just do whatever we can.
It's more about the engagement out on site rather than necessarily the report that gets sent to them. Obviously, the report's important, but it's actually more about the experience in those 2, 3, 4 hours that you're on site. It's what you do within that time.
I think so.
That leaves the impression that
because the report is like the product, effectively,
it's
right? And it's almost like the evidence to say we went, right? Because we could go and do most of what we do, and they could jot it down on a notepad, right, with their actions and whatnot. And the report is that written record, and it gives you, a to-do list, not to simplify it too much. But the value is in the time spent and the conversations had, I'd say.
Yeah. I think the other thing to say is with regards to Altitude, which is our tool that we've created. There was nothing on the market at the time. So when did we do it? We first started it in 2015, and then Altitude came in 2018. And there was nothing on the market in terms of, we tried looking at, what's the one everyone used? iAuditor, and a few others, but they were just fancy form filling exercises. What we wanted to do was to have a tool that we could create that would, as I said, help our people by being able to spend more time engaging and less time form filling. But then critically for our clients, and this has been the focus really in the last year or so, is like, how can we make a tool that helps them make better, more intelligent decisions at the site level or at the company level? And that's what this performance review you were talking about is that we can review the performance of a client. We can either do it every month, every 3 months, every 6 months. The more data we have, obviously, the better. You've recently done one, a 3-monthly one. I've recently done a year one. And what it allows us to do is to be able to take all that data that we've harvested over the year, and at the touch of a button, it can come out with, at the macro level, so company-wide, like inspection scores, incidents, near misses, repeats, we can sort of see that. But then we can start getting into like emerging focus areas. Like, what are those key top 3 to 5 areas that you're repeatedly having the non-compliances on? And what I've often found is that in construction, you can have the latest incident that takes place. Let's say, for instance, we go to a site and they've had a temporary works issue or a scaffolding issue 2 days ago. Suddenly that near miss or that incident is suddenly the most important thing within that company. Where if I'm the CEO of a company or the MD of a contractor that's got 8 projects, I don't want to be influenced by the noise. I want to look at the data and what my safety company is telling me and say, well, actually, we had an incident with regards to scaffolding, but do you know what? That was actually a one-off because of XYZ wasn't followed. Our biggest issue, and that's coming up time and time again on the emergent focus areas, is that our fire risk assessment process for construction sites is inadequate because we have got construction managers completing the fire risk assessments who aren't competent, and that basically if we have an incident or we have an insurer come down, our fire risk assessment is not going to be compliant with the joint code of practice. We're going to be held responsible. We might not be insured, all this. And I want to be able to look at the data and say, okay, you think your biggest issue is this incident that's just happened. Actually, the biggest issue you need to worry about at this moment in time is that.
That's what you're trending towards.
That's what you're trending towards. And then we can slice and dice it and say, okay, that issue there, not construction fire, let's say, for instance, it was trips. We could say, okay, that's not going to kill anyone, right? Number 1 on the list, you're picking up loads of trip hazard issues. And let's do a campaign that focuses on trip hazards, right? Okay, fine, easy, done. Actually, the second one is safe condition of electrical equipment. right? You're exposing people to live electrical, right? That could kill someone, right?
Yeah.
That's the one to focus on. And we observed it across 4 of your sites. There's a cultural issue there that you need to get into now. And we can use that data to target the client and say, we need to sort this right here, right now. And that's kind of where Altitude spawned from. It started as something and it's gone to something bigger. But I think it's paying dividends with the clients that we look after.
Oh, absolutely.
Giving them a tool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's great for them, but it's great for us. You know, as someone who's out there delivering. You know, we open up the inspection, and the first thing it tells us is how many open actions they've got from the last one.
Yeah.
So it goes back to the repeats.
Yeah.
But then that's your first conversation. You know, how are you?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'll have a tea, please.
Yeah.
Is we've got 8 open actions from the last ones. Like,
Yeah.
what's the story? Do you need some help?
Yeah.
You know, what can we do? What are they? We can find that out, and obviously they can find that out from their end. They know what they are, but we can help them out with that.
Yeah.
So that we know what we're going to see on site, and we can understand that, and then it's not. You don't want to walk out on site and be like, oh, you still haven't fixed this, because it can become a little bit accusatory. So yeah, you want to be able. You know what you're going into. You know what you can talk them through them. You can understand them, and then when you see it on site. You know, you don't turn the blind eye, but you know why it's there and you understand that it's still going to be there.
Yeah. Talk to me about, so we've purposefully tried to talk about the positives, right? But you and I both know that there are a lot of negative stuff that happens as well. There's a lot of non-compliances, a lot of poor attitude, behaviours at times. Yeah. Talk to me about maybe like a time when you're out on site and you know that you're not getting listened to. You know you've been going to a project and it's just not happening. Like they're just not improving. Like how does it make you feel as a safety professional first and foremost? But then what tactics would you employ? What would you do? Because that's going to be a very real and present issue for a lot of main contractors where they've got poor performance, they've got inconsistent practices, they know something in their gut is wrong. Yeah. But they don't know what to do about it. What's been your approach when you're working with people when that's happening?
I think the key is to try and understand why. Ask them why in a nice way, so that you're not saying, you know, why the fuck haven't you sorted this out? You know, because having been site-based, right, that is much more the approach, right? Yeah. You're much more the sledgehammer than you are the scalpels, right? So you go in there and you hammer people, and you shouldn't maybe, but you know, you go in there and you want something done right now. They do it because you work for the person that is opening the door in the morning. But when it's like this, it's understanding. So why are we having trouble with there? What's the issue? Are you not getting the labour? Have you not got anybody on site that can do it? Is it the subby? Is it them? Are they not doing it? Like we're putting the action down, are they just not reacting? You know, so it's understanding it from their point of view. Now you do get the site managers sometimes who might just sort of say, oh, I haven't got the time, or, you know, I'm too busy, and you're sort of, well, it's not you that's got to do it, you know, let's allocate it. You quickly understand, you know, how you're being received by these people, and even if we don't see it as a tick box, they do. They're like, oh, right, Javier's coming down for their monthly inspection, right, I'll give him an hour and walk him around the site, and then
don't show them the areas that they know.
Yeah, nobody's working up there. Don't worry about that bit. And then they'll park you in the office. Here's the folders. Right, get your stuff. What did I get? Okay, right, off you go. Yeah. You know? And when you do get that, you know, it is almost the last resort for me, is that you have to escalate it, right? You go to the contracts manager or whoever it is, the higher ups, and you try and understand what it is. Yeah. You know, is it them? It could potentially be that the site manager's trying with all the will in the world to get what he needs from them, materials, labour, whatever, and he can't get it because he won't provide it because there's no money. Yeah. And it just has to be that escalation and that phone call process to try and figure out where it comes from. Yeah. Yeah. And it is a bit of a tough one, really, because nobody really wants to admit they're the guy that's not is preventing the safety issues from being fixed. Yeah. Right, so what's the difference then between a project that is not running well, just plodding along, it's not great, not particularly safe, and a project that has really clicked and is really, you know, firing on all cylinders?
Leadership. And leadership from the, usually, if it's in the same company, you look at the data and one's performing really well and one's not, leadership is usually the cause of it. There is one thing to add to that though. Sometimes across a portfolio of projects, you might have a project which is actually really, really complex that they might have picked up from a contractor that's gone bust, that might have inherited issues. So that's one just little proviso to put on that. Yeah. But usually it comes down to the quality of the site management team, I find. And I've always been surprised that main contractors don't do more to create more systemization and more standardization across their projects, and invest more in leadership training of their teams. It tends to be that people move up the chain, not always based on competence. It can just sort of happen with time and everything else. And sometimes you've got people that aren't as good people that suddenly start managing lots and lots of people and can't do it, and then you've got other ones who are brilliant at it but might not be as more commercially minded. So it's a Rubik's cube. But generally, it usually comes down to leadership. If you've got the same company and they've got two sites, one performing well, one not, and they're pretty much the same project, it will usually come down to the project manager and the construction manager. And it would usually come to the way that they have got an ability to bring people with them. They probably have more of a collaborative approach where they bring people with them, where it's not quite as blame game. Construction industry is notorious for who can we blame?
Oh yeah, you've got an area to get finished, so it's not done. So it's all.
So it's you. We're going to do an extension of time because this hasn't been
held
done.
us up.
Yeah, and it's like, no, let's just how do we all work together to get this project delivered safely, profitably? Everyone goes home, makes a bit of money, goes home safely, job's done. On the converse side, if you've got a site manager, they might have been not with the company as long. They might be an agency site manager. They might just not be that invested. They might be having personal issues outside of work which are impacting it. Who knows? And essentially they could come at it with a very different approach, which is, right, my approach is to look good to my superiors. Everyone else is the problem. The people are the problem. Health and safety is just holding me up. And it's like an attitude and a behaviour. And essentially that's what it comes down to, in my opinion. Attitude and behaviours and leadership. And that's why you could have a company with two very different performing projects.
Yeah.